We weren't tit for tat. It was all on me because she could still feel it and show it and make me fucking smile. And I couldn't do that for her. So when she'd come at night, I'd fold into myself. I was there in the room, but I was gone. Swimming in my head and searching the murky depths for that same thing every night and never fucking finding it. I became lost and desolate as the feeling of hopelessness washed over my being and lingered stagnantly in the air surrounding me. I hated what it was doing to her. For those nights she was with me, all of her smiles were forced and faked. And for the first time ever, I wished she would put the hood on and just fucking hide her hurt from me because I couldn't take it away. Before she left on New Year's Eve, we had to discuss an alternate plan for her coming over that night. Carlisle and Esme were holding a block party in the back meadow by the river. They did it every year, the water making it safe to shoot off fireworks. As if anything in this fucking town was dry enough to catch fire. We were all forced to make an appearance at midnight, and the whole fucking yard would be too visible to the partygoers for any lattice climbing. I toyed with the idea of just canceling the entire night with my girl, but eventually found that I didn't want to ring in the new year alone, and fucking tired. So I settled for the front door. It was easy, and no one would be out front during the party, so it made sense to me. I relayed the plan to her detachedly, still keeping a distance from her and speaking in a monotone voice, so she couldn't see all of my fucking self-disgust and blame it all on herself. She agreed in a quiet voice, before she left out the door that morning. I felt shittier every time she left. I'd give her a gentle kiss on the cheek, and she'd leave without looking me in the eyes, hurt and feeling rejected, and trying to hide it from me and not fucking succeeding in the least. It was in those moments, those small soft kisses, that I tried harder than ever to feel it for her. I wanted to grab her and crush her to me and tell my girl that it was finally there, and watch as her face lit up like a fucking Christmas tree at the sound of me saying it. But it never happened. I spent New Year's Eve day alone in my room after she left. Maybe I was fucking wallowing and acting like a complete emo douchebag, but I couldn't help it. I wanted to snap out of it so I could keep trying to be more for her. Wondering if maybe I was pushing it too hard, and thinking that maybe if I gave it time, it would just come to me, like when you try to remember something so fiercely, and you just fucking can't until the second you stop trying. But the desperation and hopelessness of the whole situation just fucking pulled me under and held me down. I was wondering if Daddy C wasn't right all along when he suggested I had some kind of chemical imbalance. Then I was wondering what kind of drugs it would get me if I did. Then I was wondering if maybe the drugs would make it possible to feel it. If they would, I would take them in a fucking second. Just see my girl smile when I finally showed her. No one bothered me that day. Everyone was so fucking caught up in the party preparations that I was paid no notice. Which was just fucking fine by me. By the time the block began filtering into the yard that night, I had grown impossibly darker. I could hear the music and laughing and happiness coming from my balcony door, and it made me want to fucking vomit. I turned off my light when they began shooting off fireworks, letting the eerie glows illuminate my room, in a strange opposition to my own personal atmosphere. At 11:30, I pulled on my leather jacket and boots, and made my way outside to the backyard. I was only showing up to please Carlisle, and maybe catch a glimpse of my girl's smile as she watched the fireworks. I hadn't seen her smile in days. I trudged across the yard, glaring down at my shoes, as my mood grew impossibly sour with the cheery and upbeat music playing. Brandon had the meadow behind the gazebo completely illuminated with lights, and a rather impressive sound system that was all too classy for the Forks block crowd. I had to give it to her. She never did shit half-ass. It was an admirable characteristic I envied quite thoroughly. Because half-ass was something I found I was really fucking good at. There were plenty of people around, drinking, and smoking, and laughing at jokes. I could spot Carlisle by a barbecue pit, making food for all of the guests. No one spared me a glance as I made my way to an empty folding chair at the edge of the crowd just beyond the gazebo. I flopped down in it heavily, feeling cold as fuck, and spreading my feet out wide in front of me while I stared blankly at the river. The occasional firework lit up the meadow even more, casting brilliant reflections in the water of the river. I chanced to glance around to see if my girl had made it out yet. I could spot Jasper at the far end of the meadow hanging all over Brandon and looking so fucking happy and in love it made me hate him a little. I watched her smile widely as he spun her around and planted a big wet kiss on her neck. She laughed joyously at his actions, throwing her little head back while all her spiky hair brushed his cheeks. He smoothed it back lovingly and in a very Jasper gesture kissed the back of her hand after he released her lovingly, making her smile. It can never fucking be me. I looked away from that scene, feeling pretty fucking bitter about the whole thing, and kept looking around. But then I spotted Emmett and Rosalie at the other side of the meadow, looking fucking happy and madly in love too. And the more I looked the more I saw it. And the more I saw it, the more bitter I became. I kept searching for Bella, trying to force down the bile that was forcing its way up my throat at the sight of all the happy fucking couples. At first I didn't see her, and I thought that she might have stayed inside, which kind of fucking disappointed me. Aren't girls supposed to like fireworks? But then I finally found her standing upright, away from everybody in the crowd 20 feet away from me, and looking pretty fucking uncomfortable and cold. She was standing in the darkness, just like I was. At least we're still tit for tat on something. I stared at her unabashedly in the darkness of my lounging spot. She was wearing her hoodie with the hood drawn up tight around her. But occasionally, she would lift her head up to the sky to watch a lone firework that would illuminate her face in various colors. She looked so fucking beautiful. I felt a strange and powerful tugging sensation at watching her, where she stood shrouded in the darkness. And itching to go and be with her, that was so strong my feet twitched. And it was kind of fucking weird that I reacted like that because I had spent many days with her in school, looking but avoiding. I continued watching her in curiosity as the countdown to midnight reached the 2-minute point. She shoved her hands into her hoodie pockets and looked at the ground, kicking the wet grass carelessly with her feet. No one in the crowd even spared her a glance as she stood covered in darkness. I stared at her intensely, willing her to meet my gaze so that I could look into her eyes and see if the fireworks made her happy. And then suddenly her head snapped up towards me from the ground, and her brown eyes met mine. She looked surprised. Probably that I was even fucking bothering to come out in here in the cold to watch the fireworks. But she didn't look happy or wondrous at the sight of the flashing in the sky. She hastily broke the stare and began looking around at the crowd that was pairing up for their midnight New Year's kisses as the countdown continued. All those fucking happy couples who had someone else to start the new year with. Her face fell at the sight of it as the tugging in my chest became more prominent. And I just had to fucking do it. I tried to justify the risk with the fact that I wanted her to have a New Year's kiss like everyone else. Or maybe even because I wanted one too. But it was a fucking lie. The tugging was pulling me to her so strongly that I couldn't fucking take it anymore. I shot up from my chair and sprinted towards her, hugging the cover of the darkness that we lingered on the fringe of. She didn't see me coming, but I knew she felt me. The electricity that she always said made me feel like home to her. When I finally reached her, I grabbed her covered arm and pulled her back towards me into more of the darkness. She spun around and looked at me wide-eyed, but I didn't have the time to explain. So I held her arm firmly and pulled her away from the river and the meadow, jogging to the safe cover of a gazebo. She remained silent as she followed hastily behind me. Once we ran up onto the platform of the dark gazebo, I spun around and pushed her up against one of the large beams that would hide us from the sight of the crowd. Her eyes were wide and shocked as I chanced to peek around the beam to determine if we were seen. But everyone was too caught up in their own kissing partners to notice anything else as the countdown reached 20 seconds. I was kind of fucking breathless from the adrenaline of the running and sneaking around. I glanced back at my girl who was standing in front of me, pressed up against the beam wide-eyed and searching my face. I stepped closer to her until I was pressed completely against her, almost completely relaxing as the tugging inside of me subsided with her proximity, and pulled her hood off. I let out a deep breath and smiled at my girl. The first real smile I had felt in days. She looked so fucking confused it made me want to chuckle at her. But instead I just took her little face in between my hands as the countdown